This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex, and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Welcome, George. Thanks for being here again.
Good morning in our time zone, Dr. Marlene. Always great to be with you.
Well, we have a really interesting, I think, show today. This is a topic that I am pretty passionate about, although I think I say that almost every week, and it's true. If I'm not pretty passionate about something, we don't talk about it. But this one is really near and dear to my heart because this I have lived, and it's the blended family dynamics. And specifically, what we're going to get into in a little bit are step sibling relationships. But there's an art, as you and I both know, George, and I'll let you speak to this too, to blending a family, blending two families. So I'm going to just stop there. I mean, you want to just comment on that? That alone is a challenge, huh?
Well, I think sometimes it's very difficult for families to integrate with each other and can really use some help in that regard. It's a difficult thing. Step parents, that's a difficult subject. There's an art to being a good step parent. So those things are all on the table, I guess, at this time for today.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I'm going to dive right in to what I've been experiencing. And I say this probably every other week, but we often, if not every week, we often talk about whatever's going on in my cases at the time, because I think that's just a good way for people to learn and to hear about things is, real life application. So what I have going on with a step sibling situation is we've got two siblings on each side, the dad and the new stepmom. They each have two children, and those children have pretty strong feelings about how they want parenting time to go. And what I mean is, two of the kids don't necessarily want to be there all the time when the other kids are there. They do want to be there part of the time, but this is where we have to navigate this kind of stuff because they had just their dad for a while. Now they have not only stepmother, but they've got step siblings. And they said, we love our step siblings. It's fun to all be together, but we want to be with dad for a while by ourselves with stepmom, of course. But when the other two step siblings are not there. And I will tell you, George, we've crafted what I think is a beautiful plan of they are there a couple of days with the step siblings. They are there a couple of days without the step siblings. So it sounds like everybody's happy and everything should work perfectly, right? Well, in this case, it isn't so much the other step siblings who do want to be there when the others are there all the time. They're not my kids. They're not kids whose case I'm on. And so I don't really talk to them much other than when I'm there talking to my kids, the kids that I am appointed to. But the parents, the dad and stepmom, want, and I'm sure they do, they want all the kids there at the same time and all of them gone at the same time. Well, that would be lovely to have in life, you've got kind of the best of both worlds. We've got time when we're just a couple, and then we have time when we have all these kids. But I think what they don't like is when they go the other route, they've got some kids there all the time. So for a couple of days, they've got these kids. For a couple of days, they have those kids. And then for a few days, they've got all the kids. Well, they don't like that. And to me, I mean, I'm going to let you speak to this, George, but to me, this isn't about what the parents want. It really should be about what the kids want. What's your thought?
Well, I wonder if we can turn things over to the kids to do what they want. That probably gives them a little bit of the wrong message that they're in charge. So
Oh, right, right.
I'd
No,
be
you
a
got to
little,
be careful. Yes.
I'd be careful about that.
Oh, yeah. Yes. For sure. But I think we have to take how they feel about that into consideration. It's enough to get used to a new step parent, let alone get used to two new step siblings. And now every time we're with dad, instead of it just being dad, it's dad, his wife, her two kids. For a while, her parents. We won't even go there yet. We're going to get into that too. But her parents were living there for a while. So for a while, they went from one person being there when they were there to five other people being there, six total being there. And I think that's a huge adjustment for kids. And I think if they say, this is too much, this is overwhelming, we should listen.
Yeah, I think that's true. We have to listen. They have to feel listened to.
Yeah.
Uh, Probably that makes it easier on the parents as well. If the kids are not at each other's throat or at the parents' throat, it probably makes it a lot easier on the parents and on the siblings, step siblings as well.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Well, and you said something that I think is key. You said, listen to them. That's the key to me. It's not what you ultimately decide, because as you said earlier, we don't want to give them the impression that they get to just call all the shots here.
Right.
But I think it's important that they feel listened to, that we sit down, that we hear them out, that if we don't do what they're wanting and requesting, that we explain to them that we're not going to do it and why we're not going to do it. That why is important. And if it's just too much trouble to, pick up these kids and pick up those kids and whatever, and we're not going to be able to do whatever it is you want, to have that explained to kids, I think is huge because as you pointed out, then they feel heard.
Well, I think that it's particularly important as they enter teenage years that they feel listened to.
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, they're going to pull away probably from the parents, step parents or biological parents. Try and get together with a peer group so they can complain to each other about how awful it is at home. So we have to be careful about that. But I think as certainly as they enter teenage years, it's important that they feel listened to.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one battle that came up that we won, if you will, on behalf of the kids, I had two kids. This is really the one and only time that I had talked to the step sibling, one of the step siblings. But there's two boys that are entering middle school. And they both told me going into middle school that they really each wanted to stay at their own school. Now, the parents, of course, wanted them to be at the same school, but one was going into one school in one area, one going into another school. And they said, we want to stay with our friend group and we don't really want to share friends with each other. We want to keep our own friends. And I felt that was legit. And so I did talk to the step parents or the dad and stepmom, I should say, about that. And we did win that battle. And this is where being a decision maker comes into play because then you've got that authority. But luckily, I didn't have to use that authority. They agreed after I talked to them and convinced them. But I think we have to listen to our step siblings in the same household. If they say, I want to keep going to school with the kids I've been going to school with, I want to keep my own friend group. I think that's important.
Well, I think you can be very persuasive, Dr. Marlene, and so they're lucky to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I can too, but I'd rather parents not have to come into my office to figure this out.
Well, like I say, I think they're lucky to have you. You can be pretty persuasive, and it is an educational process, I think, for the parents more than the children. They, especially when they're younger, they're going to pretty much do what they're told. And but for the parents, their cooperation and collaboration is critical.
Yes, yes, it is. And often they have their own needs. For example, it's much easier to drive kids to the same school than to different schools. But this is part of a blended family. You might find yourself going to 4 different schools because you've got, kids in different schools. They're in different ages. So
Mhm.
they're in different schools, or they're at different ages. So they're in different schools for that reason, elementary and middle. But then if you've got step siblings going to different elementary schools, different middle schools, you might find yourself going to 4 schools. But that's part of a blended family, and we have to work it out.
I think it does take some logistics planning for that to happen and for it to happen smoothly. So I think perhaps if there is such a thing as it's more important in that circumstance to take the high road and to really try to collaborate with both sets of the parents to coordinate for the children, particularly as they enter the teenage years.
Right, right. And that is when it's most important because, like I said, 2 of these kids are on the verge of the teenage years and going into middle school, or now in middle school. Um, Ironically, and I was going to save this for later, but I'll go ahead and share it now. I was at one of the schools yesterday, the middle school where um, my kid goes, if you will, and sat down and talked to him about this. Now, you might wonder why I'm at a school, and I know you know, but our audience may not know. And this might be more a message for my colleagues than the parents I'm working with. But the parents should have an interest in this too. Working with kids, you've got to make sure that you've got them in a truly neutral place when you talk with them. And if one parent brings them in, if I'm in one parent's home, whatever it may be, that's not neutral. And even if they say, well, I won't be in the room, in fact, I'll leave your premises altogether, that's great. They still know you're the parent who's dropping them off, coming back to pick them up. You're going to have to be the one they talk to as soon as they're done with me. And they fear that you're going to, or know that you're going to ask them, what did you say? What did you tell her? Which I tell my parents not to do, but they do. And so to me, going to a child's school is the most neutral place because mom's not there, dad's not there. Sure, somebody is picking them up, but that's hours from now. And the other key is I don't tell parents I'm going. I let the school know and provide all the appropriate paperwork before I get there, which I had to do. In fact, I'm on my way there, and this principal asked for the paperwork showing where I'm appointed by the court and have the authority to come in and see these kids,
Mhm.
which I did. But anyway, I had to stop and figure that out because I was driving there at the time. But my point is, let your kids speak in a neutral setting. Parents always want to be the one to bring them. In fact, this very stepmother has since yesterday afternoon, sent me an email, not knowing I've seen them because they're with the other parent right now, and saying, we want to bring them in. It's important to us that we bring them because the other parent has brought them. And I'm one step ahead of her. It's like I've already gone to the school that's totally neutral, talked to the child, and I think that's what we have to do. And is this time consuming? Is it costly for the parents? Yes, it's time consuming for me. It's going to be costly for them, but it's worth it. It's what we should do.
Well, I think it's a lot less time consuming and a lot less expensive in terms of time, money, and emotion than litigating. And
Yes.
they, I have yet to see the case where parents litigate their way to a healthy co-parenting relationship.
Yes.
I've just never seen that. And so it's particularly important if you're trying to blend families like that, that you have a mental health professional on board, I think, to help with that. It doesn't come with a manual. And
No.
so it's particularly important to have a mental health professional on board, I think,
Yeah.
to help with that.
Yes, I think so too, because the parents don't always know how to navigate their kids' emotions, you know. And so I think having some help from an expert in the field is important. And, parents, they somehow feel kind of inadequate if they have to have help with things. But we don't feel that way about other areas, anxiety, depression, those kinds of mental health type issues. Um, so I don't know why we feel that way about simple things like parenting and co-parenting and blended families. This should be a no-brainer.
Well, there's a lot of complexity there. And I think
Yes.
a qualified mental health professional has a much better chance of assisting, and I use that word intentionally, of assisting the families and the parents to work out schedules and things of that nature. They have a much better chance if they have a mental health professional on board, and a much better chance of working things out than going to the attorneys and saying, this is a problem, fix it. I can't deal with the other parent in regard to our step families and so forth.
Yes. And like you have said before, your role is an adversarial role. I mean, that's kind of your role in a case, is to get them what they want, or hopefully get them what they want, but to litigate and to, you're not there to reach an agreement necessarily. I mean, it's great when that happens, but that's your role.
No, we're there because the client expects to win. They want to win.
Right.
They want their way, and
Yes.
typically that doesn't happen in a hearing. Um, one side rarely gets everything they want.
Exactly. I've never seen it. I've never seen one person, one side, if you will, get everything they want.
No, and I remind people that divorce court is a court of loss.
Yes, it truly is. Some of your sayings I'm going to make into a poster and put behind me here to go along with my other one, my tagline. Okay, it's time to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about why it's better if I am the one delivering news than the other parent or someone else. We'll talk about that when we come back. But this is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We were talking before break about why it's better if I'm involved, not just me, but anyone who does the kind of work that I do is involved and delivers news to the other parent or to grandparents in a case or any of that, than having one of the parents do it. And the reason is because I can tell the other parent or a grandparent or whoever the same thing that that parent tells them, and they'll receive it completely differently because it's coming from me, not the other parent. And people don't realize how strongly I mean that. And I know you've seen it too, George. If it's coming
Absolutely.
from the other parent, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. I think it's much better received from the mental health professional working with the families. Uh, Criticisms or corrections are much better received from you or your colleague than from the other parent. And I mean, when I would see parents, they're at their wits' end. They want to go back to court. They want what they want. They're very frustrated and expect me to help them prevail in court as to what they want. And that's not always the case because there are equities on both sides typically.
Yes, yes. And there's something about receiving any kind of information from the other parent to whom you were once married or, cohabitated or whatever the situation may be, as opposed to hearing it from someone like me who is neutral and I don't have a vested interest in what happens in your case. But I have often told parents, let me tell the other parent, let me propose it to the other parent. Let me tell the parents this, or the children for that matter, because they're just going to receive it better from an outside source, especially when it comes to the two parents. Because when one parent starts criticizing the other, you know how that's going to go over. But even making suggestions, even saying, how about if we do this? There are some parents who will say no, 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 only because it's coming from the other parent. I might have shared with you or shared on here recently that I had a parent who told me literally, he would always suggest the opposite of what she wanted, because then of what he wanted, I'm sorry, because then he would get what he wanted, because she would always object. She would always want the opposite of what he wanted. And he said, I would just suggest the other, and I know then I'm going to get what I want, because she's going to always take the other side. And I think that's true.
Don't you call that oppositional defiant disorder?
Yes, indeed. In adults, oppositional defiant
And
in adults. Yes. Well, the other piece of this that we'll talk about here are grandparents, because step siblings have enough trouble getting used to a new step parent and then new step siblings. And sometimes they love them, sometimes they hate them. Sometimes they don't have any say so over whether they're going to be there at the same time with them or not. But now throw into the mix grandparents. Because, like I said earlier, in this particular case, and it's not the only case I've had that's like this, the grandparents of the new step parent, the new stepmother in this case, lived with them for a while. So where they used to have dad, they now have dad, stepmom, two step siblings, and two step grandparents. And that's a lot. They go from one person there to six people there. And they have to get used to all these people. And when we're talking about living around them, we're not talking about, I'm going to work with them for a few hours on this project, or I'm going to be in school with them during the day, or, no, they are living with them. That's a lot. That's a lot for kids to get used to. And I just encourage parents, if you're in that situation and your kids want to spend part of that time, let's say, while the grandparents are living there, because in this case, and I think it's often the case, it's not long term. It wasn't permanent. It was not long term. If for a while they're there, and I think they were in the middle of moving or something, but it was a few months that they were there. If they want to spend more time at their other parent's house because it's just overwhelming to have all these new people there, by gosh, let them. That's my thought. What's yours?
well, on grandparents, I've seen grandparents really truly be heroes. I've seen grandparents rescue their grandchildren from parents who were active in drug addiction and alcoholism. I've seen grandparents let their home serve as the neutral place to exchange the children. Grandparents can really be heroic. And I didn't realize this. I learned this from my adult son. When he would get stressed out at home, we lived close enough to his grandparents that he would find and seek refuge in their home. And I didn't
Oh,
realize that. So growing up, I never knew that until he was an adult with children of his own. But grandparents are really potentially heroes in these situations.
they absolutely are. And I was telling my husband just yesterday, and it was because of this case, that grandparents and step parents, they both fit into this same category, or one of these two categories, I should say. They are either my greatest asset on the case, and they help things so much, and I don't know what I would do without them, or they are my biggest problem, and they just keep things stirred up, keep the conflict going, just stir up trouble. And you got to hope and pray for the former, not the latter. But I would say I've got more of the latter. Of course, families are in bad situations if they need me. Situations where I've got to be utilized means it's not good. So I may not see, or I don't see, all the ones that are going wonderfully and beautifully. I'm seeing the worst of the worst. And you have the benefit of being able to see both. Over your career, I'll bet you've seen as many good cases. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I'll let you speak to that.
No, typically I see people in crisis, or at
Yeah.
least they're in their own self-made crisis from time to time. And they're very demanding, they're scared, uh, they're angry, they want what they want. And it takes some real skill to try to redirect that anger and frustration and suggest that the involvement of a mental health professional in various roles would be much more productive, much more positive, and much more likely to come out with an outcome that is at least palatable to the parents involved.
Yeah.
The the uh, the mental health person involved in trying to soothe out and smooth out family relationships has a much better chance, not always going to be successful, but has a much better chance than trying to litigate their way into a decent co-parenting relationship.
Yes. Yes. And that is my number one favorite saying of yours is you've not seen a case yet where they've litigated their way to a good co-parenting relationship. And that is so true. And I swear I'm going to have that made into a poster. And I'll
Well,
give you credit. I'll make sure I put George under it so
oh, that's all
people will
right.
know.
I learn a lot from you, and I appreciate being on the show with you. And to the extent that I can provide some input, I'm happy to do so.
Oh, we couldn't do this without you, that's for sure, because I'm not a legal expert, that's for sure. And a lot of times, the legal aspect comes into play because we might have a situation we think is great, but if the judge isn't going to accept it and it's not what's going to get ordered, it doesn't do any good. It doesn't matter how good our plan is. So we've got to have the legal aspect too. That's for
Well,
sure.
yeah, and typically when there is a resolution that's reached, we're going to reduce that to a stipulation or agreement and
Yes.
file it with the court. And that's what I tell people when you're having conflict or difficulty in your co-parenting relationship. Your first resort is to look at your parenting plan and see
Right.
whether or not that addresses the situation that you're dealing with. And if the answer is no, then it's time to look at different alternatives like a parent coordinator decision maker, for example, to come into the case and work with the parties.
Yes. Yes. And that is something I've learned from you is always ask my parents, is it in your order? If it's already in your order, we have to follow your order because some parents will be sneaky and try to have me change their order. And they don't realize they don't realize because they didn't read the order of appointment for the parenting coordinator decision maker that that is the one thing we can't do is change an existing order. And I'm guessing that's consistent across all states, I would guess. But I know
Um,
here in Colorado, we can't.
yeah, I think that's true because you're ceding authority of the court over to someone who is not a judge, and that's just not going to fly.
Right, right. And so if there's nothing in the parenting plan about it, I can do it. But if you already have an order addressing that, don't bring it to me. And so that was something I learned from you actually years ago. And that was to make sure it isn't in the order, before you start asking me to do something about it. But like I said, parents will be sneaky and try to get me to change the order. You find out real quickly when they actually are asking for a parenting coordinator because they don't like the order. They don't like the outcome of the hearing. And they think, oh, I'll get this other person then and they can change it, not realizing it doesn't work that way.
Well, and that's part of the phenomenon that I observe where the client thinks no reasonable person would disagree with me. No
Right.
reasonable judge, no reasonable mental health professional would agree with me. Clearly, I'm correct in what I want and what I'm complaining about. And that's not always the case.
No, no. And I laugh because we sometimes hear that from both parents and they have opposing views, but no reasonable person would disagree with me. And it's like, you want to bet, you know?
Well, it's
Well, I'm gonna.
true. It's very true, and we really try to navigate that reality that both sides feel like they're the reasonable party.
Mhm, mhm. And the correct party.
Right.
Mhm. Well, just to add a little more um, context or conflict or whatever to this situation that's going on. And there's many of them. It's not just this one case. Like I said, I've had a bunch of situations that are just like this or very similar. But now to add even more to it, and then I'm going to save the big addition to the situation for our last segment here in a little bit. But to add another piece to this, the kids play sports, and the parents want the kids on the same sports team because it's easier to just run two kids to one practice than run each kid, two kids to two separate practices
Mhm.
or go to two separate games on the weekend or whatever. So it's practical for the parents. I get that. But I've had kids, and it's happening in this situation, where one kid has had his team that he's been a part of for several years. The other kid, the step sibling, has his team that he's been a part of for several years, and they each want to keep their own teams. And my take is let them do it. When you force too much change on your kids at once, and now they've lost their teammates, they have to be on a different team, have different teammates, a different coach, play at a different location, have practices at different times and days, things like that. You're asking for a lot from your children to deal with that many changes. Now, there may be an aspect of this I'm not looking at or not seeing. So I'm going to turn it over to you. But do you generally agree with that, or am I missing something?
No, I generally agree with that, and the practical reality, the logistics, if you will, of the family relationship, the kids are already dealing with the introduction of a new significant other for their parent.
Hmm.
And so they need some stability, some sense of continuity, and they can get that if the parents are collaborating, are co-parenting healthfully, well, and that's critical because otherwise the kids are just adrift, and so they may turn to peers, peer
Hmm.
groups, and
Hmm.
if they do, we hope they're a healthy peer group, but that's not
Yes.
the case.
Right. Right. That absolutely is not always the case. Often these are the kids who are, getting into alcohol and drugs and things like that, or just have temper problems, things like that. Because they are kids who just haven't learned how to cope and have a lot of conflict and anxiety and change. Change is the key element here that I think people don't think about is it's change. I also have told these parents, you were each getting your kids to their games and their practices before. You can do it again because they say it isn't practical. Well, you were doing it before. You didn't have each other. So you each had to get them to their respective practices. So you can keep doing it. Well, it's time for another quick break, but we will come back um, to the I don't know if you want to call it a barnstormer, but the last aspect to this that I think we have to take a look at when we come back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. I said that I was going to save the kicker for last, but add to everything else we've talked about in this situation, and this happens a lot. This is, again, not just this one case or this one situation, but this marriage between this dad and stepmom is volatile. And when I say volatile, I mean high conflict. Police have been called. They just have a lot of conflict. So, George, you and I know what that means, that this marriage is probably not going to last for the long haul. You know, it's probably not going to be a long-term marriage. And I'm going to just stop there and let you take it.
Well, I think if police are being called and so forth, that bodes very poorly for the healthfulness of the relationships in the home. Typically, we're going to be looking at a contempt citation. We may be looking at a restraining order.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is not an environment where I think the children are going to thrive. They're going to hide from the conflict. They're going to be seeking ways to get away from the conflict, and that's too bad. I mean, the children suffer under those circumstances, and the step parent, we're asking them a lot. We're asking them to really embrace someone else's children and be kind to them, be loving to them. We understand that. It takes some adjustment, but it's so worth it for the healthfulness of the children.
Yes, absolutely. And in the context of what we're talking about today with the step family and step sibling in particular relationships, this is another reason why I say if the kids want things separate, if they want some time in that household when the other kids aren't there, if they want their own school, if they want their own ball team, by gosh, let them have it. Because in this case, I don't think these step siblings are going to be together long term. And they don't think it. When I went to the school yesterday and talked to the boy, he doesn't think they'll be together long. And even said, I don't know why they don't just get a divorce right now. I mean, he sees it coming, he knows it's coming. So we try to blend these families only to rip them apart again. And this is why I'm so passionate about this topic of blended families, because we all talk about how to make this perfect blended family, and it's work. But then what happens often, I mean, this is not a rare occurrence. Often, maybe there isn't domestic violence or conflict involved, but they just don't stay together for whatever reason. And so now you're pulling back apart this family that you were so set on blending. And you get parents who are just dug in on having them there at the same time, having them go to the same school, be on the same ball teams, all that kind of stuff, have the same extracurricular activities besides sports, like maybe a scout troop or a karate class or whatever they go to. And now you're going to pull everyone apart again. And they are stuck with this person who used to be their step sibling and they were in the home with them half the time or whatever, to being just another kid at the school. And that's just not healthy, I don't think.
No, and from a legal standpoint, what I'm looking at is the social capital that
Mm-hmm.
kids develop. And so when a parent wants to disrupt that, typically that's when you get a fight. And
Yeah.
so we're going to fight about the disruption to that child of his or her social capital. And that comes up in relocation cases, that comes up in
Mm-hmm.
modification cases. And so sometimes I think we overlook the importance of the social capital that the child has developed in his or her life.
Yes. Yes. And that's why courts typically prefer that kids stay in the same school. And before the parents even get into another relationship. Often just the two parents going through their divorce will disagree about the school. And usually the court will opt for keeping them in the same school. And it's for exactly the reason you said, that social capital of they've got these friends, these teachers, this school counselor, this ball team that's associated with that school. All of those things, or a scout troop that's associated with that school, that's their social capital. And when everything else is changing, we want to keep as much intact and the same as we can, just to keep their lives a little bit consistent. And then add to it a blended family, and now you're going to rip that back apart. I mean, that makes all these things even more important. The social capital that they've developed, even more important.
I think so. And this is where grandparents and step parents really can earn their angel's wings, if you
Yes,
will,
yes.
because they often present, especially grandparents, present a place and people of refuge for children
Mhm.
who are caught up in the conflict of divorce, especially if there's a second one going on. That's just
Yes.
really hard on the kids, and people need to understand that and prioritize uh, stability for their children over their own needs to fight. Really.
Right, right. Well, and that's why I think it's a beautiful story about your son telling you years later that he went to his grandparents and found that as his refuge. That's beautiful. I mean, that's, I think, what kids need. But when we're forcing them in a blended family situation to develop an attachment to a step parent and to step siblings and to step grandparents, and then take that all back away from them, that is a lot of loss. And like I said a minute ago, if they're also now in school and on ball teams and other activities, with this step sibling who now is no longer their step sibling. Wow, that's a lot of change. We're expecting a kid to endure and navigate.
Well, and it's really kind of unfair to expect that of the children. I think the parents are the ones who need to deal with change more effectively, more constructively, than and that would help the children deal with their change as well.
Yes, yes, it would. If the parents will just suck it up and keep driving their kids to their same school and to their same ball practice and all of that, then the kids will navigate all of it much better too. It isn't always the most convenient, but it's the most stable for your kids. And that's what they need. Parents worry way too much about their own convenience over their kids' needs and stability and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's part of taking the high road is for the parents to realize that the development of the social capital for their children is important to the children. And the parents sometimes ignore that.
They do. They do. They don't realize how important it really is, or they grossly underestimate the importance. Well, it is hard to believe that we are out of time again. It goes by so quickly. Thank you, George, for once again doing this with me.
Pleasure to be with you, Dr. Marlene. Always interested in helping people to take the high road with their kids.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, we'll be back next week with another new wonderful topic. But this is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.